JT Wistrcill of Locked On Utes. This feels kind of like an Ellen or an Oprah deal where I get to tell all. You were there when an analyst comes on your show and alludes to BYU promising NIL money they can't deliver on, and the conversation was based around, are the Cougars tampering and what is going on in the transfer portal between BYU and Utah. And that blew up. Message boards, podcast, everywhere. People wanted to know more about this allegation, and you were sitting right there when it happened. I want to know your explanation for what was said, what you know from other sources around you, and looking back to today, what's new, right? Where's the update? Is that something that had legs?
Look, Alex has his sources. I know you had Jake Hatch on last week, and he has his sources. So the college football is an incredibly complicated space right now, and NIL deals are incredibly complicated and everything that happens in there. So I'm not going to try to do who's reporting, who was correct, who wasn't, because then I love Jake. I love Alex. I appreciate both those guys so much. So I don't really want to take a stance on either one of them and be like, oh, this is exactly what's going on. Because I can't speak for what I've been told in terms of I haven't heard from like, hey, this is exactly what's going on behind the scenes. So I want to respect those two guys reporting and say right there. What I do want to talk about though is the tampering stuff. That to me is something that it has so many people talking about right now, what is going on. And I also want to clarify and narrow this down a little bit because Drake, you've talked about this a lot on your show too. And I want to narrow it down what I think most Utah fans' frustration is about. This is not about a guy in Hunter Clegg coming back from his mission and going to BYU. That happens all the time. I don't think there's anything off or different about that situation. This is not about even a Carson Ryan who right as the way the portal opens and he's gone. He says right away, like, I'm gone. I'm going to enter the portal and go from there. So this is another situation. I want to just focus on what happened to Keanu Tanuvasa. Tanuvasa, if you guys have, most of you probably know the story by now, right? Says, I'm a Utah man, shades another Utah player for leaving, then decides to leave. As soon as he decided to enter the portal, reports came out from several, whether it's Josh Furlong, who covers Utah very closely. He's one of the main beat reporters at KSL.com. Then you get a guy in Alex Markham of Utah Rivals, who does a really good job covering Utah as well. You get Steve Bartle, who had a piece on KSL Sports, said, according to sources, there was zero indication that Tanuvasa's transfer was imminent. Yes, his decision to enter the portal was likely fueled by the market for defensive linemen. These are credible journalists who are not just pulling things out of their butt. I absolutely believe an NIL deal was in place. Now, I do also want to say this. Is BYU doing something illegal and all these things of that nature? I'm sure by the letter of the law like that, when we get into tampering, whatever you want to say about tampering. But guess what? Everyone in college football is tampering right now. I'm sure Utah's been involved in some of it. I think everyone has been involved in tampering in one way or another. And there's no evidence that you can really cling to. And you might say that's kind of crazy for you just to say that. But also just it really doesn't take that long of a Google search to see how many other college football coaches are accusing this person of tampering and that person of tampering. And I'll also say this, Keanu Tanuvasa's dad came out anyways and said, hey, after New entered the portal, New being his son, that Utah offered enough to keep him, but he chose BYU. So good for Tanuvasa for making that choice. I hold no ill will towards Tanuvasa, but to act like nothing happened when he said he was going to stay at Utah, then shades another player for leaving, then ends up deciding to leave, and then these reporters that I trust are saying that an NIL deal was involved, then yeah, I'm going to lean towards that as there was something going on behind the scenes. But BYU is not the only one. Utah's probably done it too. Like I said, this is widespread in college sports right now.
Yeah. There are high school coaches, trainers, little league, whoever that are involved in these who get a call from, it doesn't have to be. Kalani Sitake could have had nothing to do with this. Kyle Whittingham.
Okay, really quick, can I say something? The Kalani Sitake, I've put nothing in the Kalani Sitake going up to Carson Ryan, Keanu Tanuvasa after the game. That is coincidence all the way around. I do not think there was anything there with how long after it was. Could he have maybe said, like, I'd love for you to be a Coug? Yeah, I'm sure he said that to 80 other Utah players at some point. Kyle Whittingham might have been saying the same thing to them for Utah. So I don't think there was anything wrong with that. And I've always been a big fan of Kalani Sitake.
Yeah, I don't think that he was involved in a war room here where he's on the phone with a kid. He can't be. Yeah. You start leaving a trail that is undeniable, and that's how you get fired in college football. Though there could have been a BYU donor. I tomorrow, as someone who graduated from Baylor, I could pick up the phone and I could call Cam Scadaboo and say, hey, come back, use a year of eligibility, go to Baylor, I'll pay you $5 million. And the NCAA can't crack down on Baylor. They can't crack down on me. What are they going to do? Fine me? They can't. They don't have. It's not within their bounds to call the donor and be like, oh, can't do that. I could DM tomorrow any member of the Utah football team and say, I will give you $5 million to go play for BYU, to go play for Texas Tech, to go play for Baylor. And that is certainly happening because coaches don't have to be involved in that. It is as simple as direct. We've never been so connected with everybody in the world.
It is. And that's exactly right. This is not Kalani Sitake saying, hey, this is the plan. Let's go do this. This is agents are more than anything. It's not even college football teams as much as I think it is the agents trying to base the value and then trying to maximize that. I think it was Coach Norvell, the one at Colorado State, had a big statement on this about what agents are kind of doing and how much money they end up taking from the NIL deals. So college, it's covering this sport is an insane time right now because of the NIL, because of the tampering. Drake, what other year can you remember players tweeting out like, I'm going to stay at this school? Or even we've seen guys commit to schools and then decommit days later and put their names right back in the portal, and then they'll go somewhere else. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before.
It's chaotic for sure. And I think it's cool when a player says I'm staying home and they don't go anywhere. Less cool when they say that and they end up leaving. Could have gone without the graphic. And man, this brings out the worst every time. And this has nothing to do with a single player that I want to call out individually, but I see it all. A Utah man I am, or hook 'em or sick 'em or any of those. No, you're not. You're the opposite of a Utah man, actually. You left. You don't go there anymore. You can't enter the transfer portal and be like, hey, thanks for my time. Great 2 years. We're a family. All right, sure. A Utah man I am. No, you're telling me that you're not that thing anymore. You can't just be like, this is home. No, it's not. No, it's not. You're choosing to leave for whatever reason that may be. And you no longer wear that. You're wearing someone else's logo on you. You're like they said Blake Shapen will always be a Baylor Bear. He's not. He's actively a Mississippi State Bulldog. He's actively doing a thing that is not the Baylor Bears. So that's the chaos that always gets under my skin. But JT, looking back on that segment, looking back and now in the tell-all, is there anything you would have done differently? Anything you feel like should have been clarified?
I wish look here, and I've said this before. Alex, if you watch the full episode, Alex is very connected, and he is not just going to risk his journalistic, if I just make up a word, I think, reputation to stir just a random rumor. And that's the one thing I'll say. I wish I had said, hey, Alex, is this what you're hearing? Like, I wish I had stopped the whole thing in that moment, but I also didn't want to interrupt him. I wanted to let him talk for this. So that's why I wish I would have just said that. But also, once again, like, listen to the full episode. Go back and listen to the episode I had with him on December 9th, I think it was. He talked about Kyle Whittingham coming back, offers great insight into what's going on there. And if he had stopped every 10 seconds to say, hey, sources said this, we would have been there for an hour long. So that's another big thing I want everyone to keep in mind like that. Watch the full episode. Look at the way he is presenting his information. And he is not just throwing things out there to see and try if they land, if they stick. Utah Rivals has been on the Utah beat for a long time. Alex Markham does a really good job covering Utah. And I know, look, you don't have to like it. You don't have to believe it. That's your choice. But the people who act like Alex has made this up, and I said this on my own show, once again, he's not going to risk his reputation. That's all I'm going to say.
JT, where can folks find more of your work?
Or where can they hate on me for probably half the people listening to this? Anyway, so that's at JT Wistersill on X. You could go over and Locked On Utah on YouTube as well. Always talking all things Utah as the offseason is very chaotic. Drake, always great hopping on with you.
Absolutely. It's been one of the biggest stories so far of the offseason, the BYU and Utah possible tampering allegations, whatever. It's been big. So glad to hear from you and glad that we clarified a good portion of that. This has been, and it always will be. Keep coming back the rest of this week for all of your Utah Utes and Big 12 content. Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.